Explain the design of high-end power cables. Okay, where's the snakes? We got to bring out the snakes, because clearly this is going to put the hair on the back of someone's neck up, and maybe more than just a few. This question comes from Mark in Wiltshire, England. Now, I don't know where Wiltshire is. In October, Terry, Scott, and his wife Teresa and I are all traveling to the UK for a week. We're going to do a really cool, we're going to go see, Terry wants to go see this Harry Potter play in London, and then we're going to take a driving tour to go up to Cambridge and over to the Seven Sisters. If you've ever seen that, it's sort of like the White Cliffs of Dover, but you hike up and it's pretty cool. And what else? So where are we going? Not Eastwick. I don't remember. Anyway, looking forward to it. We're just going to see the actual countryside, which I've never seen before. I've seen plenty of London, but never the kind of the countryside. And yeah, did I say Cambridge? Yeah, going to Cambridge. And Bath. I think Bath is supposed to be pretty neat. Okay. Anyway, enough of that. I would love to know what your thinking was when. What the hell were you thinking? When you design the AC5, AC12 power leads, as they have a very unusual design with solid bars and hollow conductors. How did you and the engineering team get to those designs? What was the problem which led you to those answers? Well, okay. So, well, first off, the AC series is a series of power cables that we make and sell, and they're not cheap. I don't know, $100, $200, maybe more. Which to some is a king's ransom for a power cable that you can go out and get as a throwaway on your little Sony with zip cord, right? And so, of course, ours are nothing compared to some companies that produce thousands of dollar power cables. And power cables perhaps put the hair on the back of the objectivists' necks far more than audio cables. Audio cables, they can almost give us a pass. Yeah, well, we can see how the audio signal can be disrupted. There's inductance, there's things that crosstalk, there's noise, there's all of this that we could maybe cut you a pass that they can sound different under certain circumstances, but for the most part they say it doesn't. Power cables? Nah. That gets the bullshit award for just about every objectivist engineer I've ever met, until they actually hear it. They may not be able to explain it, but I have yet to find an engineer that can sit here and tell me they can't hear a difference when plugging one power cable in from another. They all do. They all deny its existence. And that's why they get the Snake Award. All right, so I'm not here to debate this, I'm not trying to sell you a cable. I'm just trying to answer the question, okay? Seriously. You don't have to take my word for it. In fact, don't. Hook up the worst power cord you can, and you believe in your heart that that's as good as it's going to get, and God be with you. I mean, seriously. While the rest of us, who put in decent sounding power cables, are enjoying a better form of music on our high-end audio systems. And then you can laugh at us. It's okay. We're all right with it. We really are. So, Mark wants to know, what the hell was in your head when you started doing that? Well, first off, I'll start at the very beginning, and it's with a product called the lab cable. And this was quite a while ago. I'm not very good with dates, so I really don't remember how long ago the lab cable was, but I had noticed for many years, Stan and I knew years and years ago, back in the 70s and the early 80s when we started the company, that power mattered, like the use of bigger power transformers. In fact, I hadn't thought of this, but if you'll notice, what is this? It's our phono converter. So here's our phono converter, right? Now this takes almost no current. There's a very efficient amplification system inside, an A to D converter, and it's a pretty cool little product for doing phonos. But look at the size of the transformer. This transformer is 10 times the size that it needs to be, if you can see that. And all of our products have oversized power transformers inside. Why? Well, they simply sound better. The impedance is lower. We can get a much bigger sound by putting on, I know it sounds trite, but we get a much bigger, heavier sound and more musical sound by using oversized transformers. And this is something that I've talked about before. Stan was the one that originally discovered that, showed it to me, and I've used it ever since. And the bigger the better. I mean, you know, if we even had a bigger transformer in here, it would be even better sounding. But then we have hum problems, and you know, there's a practical limit to what you can do. But given that power transformers made such a difference and that audio cables made such a difference, we began experimenting with power supply wiring and using different kinds of wiring, whether it was stranded or solid core, seemed to make a difference in the way the units sounded. And look, I'm the first to admit that we're subjectivists first. If we think about something that should or shouldn't work, we'll try it and listen to it and see if it makes a difference. If it does, we'll do our best to try and figure out from an engineering perspective what are the parameters that are actually changing that we can then manipulate and put into a design, and it'll manifest itself into our designs. But if at the end of the day we find out that solid core sounds better than stranded and we don't understand why, that's okay. Because I'd rather build something that I know sounds good, that I can hear sounds good, even if I don't quite understand, or our engineering team doesn't quite understand the mechanisms for it. That's all right. As opposed to guys who say, well, if I don't understand it, I ain't gonna do it. I don't care what somebody thinks it sounds like. You know, that's sort of like a cook saying, well, this is the way you cook this thing, even if it doesn't taste good. Or this guy shakes it up 3 times and throws salt over his shoulder, and that sounds better, or that tastes better. Okay, silly as that sounds, we just go along with it, right? Okay, so that's our MO. So back when I wanted to do the lab cable, I thought, let's just find out. Sorry, I must have. There's a lot of smoke in the air here. There's a lot of fires from California that are coming over. That have been turning our skies like red and pink. So I'm sorry for the people in California. I guess it's just part of life these days with global warming and the weather and all that. Fires, yikes. Well, never gets boring. Anyway, so I wanted to start experimenting with power cables and find out what made a difference. So years ago, one of the first things I did is I said, let's start with the very basic. What's in our walls is called Romex. That's a brand name, but essentially it is a heavy gauge of solid copper wire. And in this country, we call it Romex. In this building here, we use 12 gauge is what we recommend to our customers, 12 gauge Romex. So Romex is usually 3 conductors, ground, hot, and a neutral. And it's solid core, which means it's just one big thick chunk of aluminum that's inside the wire. So that's what's inside your walls. All right, that's a great starting point. What if I took Romex solid core wire and turned it into a power cord? That's just an extension of what's over there. How would that compare to what I would normally have for a power cord, which is stranded wire? So if you think about it, most power cords are very flexible, right? You pick up a power cord, you can tie it in a knot. Well, you can't do that with Romex because it's very heavy solid core. So they make power cables for convenience, so you can wrap it around somewhere and plug it in. Well, that's because even though it may be made with 12 gauge wire, it's many strands of fine wire. So what's the difference then if I took a 12 gauge stranded wire and a 12 gauge solid core wire and turned both of them into line cords and put it on the stereo system? Well, I was dumbfounded to discover that there is a hell of a difference. So in a nutshell, what I discovered back then was that zip cord, which is what we used to call the stranded wire that's typically found in your throwaway cables, is thin sounding. There isn't a lot of heavy bottom end. It doesn't have a lot of thump on the bottom. It's just great highs. You know, when I listen to a stereo, if I use that, say, into a power amplifier, and I plug a stranded cable, power cable, into the power amplifier, it will sound very, very welcome and warming and great on the top end, but it's kind of wimpy on the bass. And the opposite is true with the Romex. Romex is big and busty, but kind of rolled off on the top end, and that's kind of what you hear. So, I mean, you can see where this is going. If I combine the two together and I make now a power cable that has this 12 gauge solid core for the bass, and then I wrap around that some measure of stranded wire in parallel with that, would I get the best of both worlds? Turns out, yes. Turns out I have a power cable that's big and ballsy, and it also has top end. You can make the experiment yourself. Get on to Home Depot and you can do both of them. Try it yourself. If you have a highly resolving system, you don't need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on power cables to exaggerate a point. Not at all. Just make the experiment that I did, and you'll hear for yourself what I found. So that's kind of the basis for it. And without getting too deep into it now, because I really don't, I'm sure I've gone long enough already. By combining, like the hollow core. Hollow core is a type of conductor that has a lot of surface area, right? Because it's a thin sheet of something with tons of surface area. And when you have lots of surface area, as you do in the fine wires, you get a lot more high frequencies come through as opposed to thick, heavy, solid core. So a combination that we've used, kind of like making a recipe, is how all that came to be. And eventually, it wound up becoming the AC-12 and the AC-5, our power cables. Enough of the snakes. Talk to you tomorrow.